Hello and welcome to episode 30 of the Crazy Knitter Studio podcast. My name is Kristen, also known as Crazy Knitting Fool on Ravelry, and I'm your host. Today is Saturday, February 18th, 2017, and I'm calling this Moving Along. So going right into things, starting lineups, the introductions. There's been no introductions since the last episode. So if you'd like to get a little shout out on the show, just come on over to the Ravelry group and introduce yourself and I'll give you a shout out. So moving into things, presser, weeks in review. So last time I recorded, it was Super Bowl weekend. And wow, what a Super Bowl. So I fell asleep about 8:30 with the little man. And the Falcons, who I was rooting for, were up by 25 points. I woke up about 10:30 and it was overtime. And then the Patriots won. It was crazy. Good game. Missed most of it because I was asleep, but oh well. Moving on. Little man has been having some issues. I'm not sure what's going on, if it's something at school or whatever, but 3 weeks in a row, we received a call from school saying he had a headache and he had a fever, a slight fever, like 99.6, 99.9. I went and picked him up. One day my husband went and picked him up. He was fine. We get him home, we take his temperature's fine. I don't know what's going on, knock on wood. Didn't happen this past week. He has a 4-day weekend because it's President's Day here on Monday in America, and they get Monday and Tuesday off for midwinter break, so hopefully whatever it was has resolved itself. So last Friday, he actually got an impromptu 3-day weekend because when we left to go to school, the car had died. So the bus had already left, and it's about 2.5 mile walk one way to his school from our house, and it's doable, obviously, in warm weather, but when it's 10 degrees like it was last week, and you have somebody with asthma, little man, no, sorry. That was an asthma attack waiting to happen. And my luck, I would be walking back from dropping him off, and I'd get home, and they would call me and tell me I gotta come pick him up. So he stayed home, I worked from home, and then my husband put a new battery in the car on Saturday. We knew the battery was dying. We're just procrastinators and put it off, and this is what we get. So, oh well. And then last Sunday was the 15th anniversary of my mom's passing away, so it sucked. I hate that day. I just played games with little man and tried to ignore it, and I'm not going to really talk about it much here, so moving on. This past week, I've been training at work to be the backup for the girl who does our invoice to our client twice a month, and it's a 3.5, 4-day process. So my brain has been crazy. It's like 3 days to do the actual invoice, and then a half a day or a day, depending on how big the invoice is, to get the checks and the ACH payments out once they provide the funds to our bank. So it's been crazy. I don't like it, but I have to do it, so oh well. And then last night we had our charity volleyball game with our school and another school, and all the proceeds, like the snacks and the money to get in, everything goes to charity. So our school lost again, 2nd year in a row, but at least this year my son did not throw a hissy fit when they lost, so that was good. So moving on into the knitting, first downs, whips. I only have one. So I am making cabled slippers, which is the summer cabled slipper pattern, which is free on Ravelry. Can't really see it very well, but it's knit flat and seamed. If you don't like doing that, just be prepared. So I'm using size 7, 4.5 millimeter needles, and Red Heart Super Saver in Cherry Red. So I am ready to do the decreases and sew up the first slipper. Even though it's almost 60 degrees here today. And the little guy and I are going to go out later. It's about 12:30. I'll eat lunch and then we're going to go for a walk. So, because when it's almost 60 degrees in February in Michigan, you go outside. All right, moving on into the touchdowns. So these are the FOs. I have 2. First up is Preemie Hat number 3 for the year. This is the Little Surprise Baby Hat pattern by Marianne Mel. I use size 3, 3.25 millimeter needles, and the yarn is Sheep Dreamery Allure in Aquitaine. There we go, cute little pat. And then preemie hat number 4 for the year is the Little J Preemie Hats by Marianne Mell again. And it's size 3, 3.25 millimeter needles, and the yarn is Sheep Dreamery Allure in Aquitaine. These will be going to my niece again to take to the NICU where she works. All right, turnovers, mistakes. I did miss across the cable. I noticed on Wednesday when I was at knitting night, miss across the cable on the slippers, but I was able to fix it rather easily. I was only about 3 rows past it, so that was a quick and easy fix. All right, moving on into training camp, future projects. I'm still planning on casting on the Hermione's Everyday Socks, free pattern on Ravelry, and I will be using Patton's Croy Socks FX, and this is, what's the color? Celestial Colors. It's purples and teals and greens, and it's not coming out very well, but I love it. So I will be casting on those at some point. And I've decided I need to work on my son's blankets. So I have always felt like 5 is a big year. I always say you're a whole hand old. So the year he turned 5, I kept track of the temperature every day for that year. And I have a little, Evernote with all of them. And I'm going to do one of those temperature blankets, but I haven't decided how I want to do it yet. So I have the colors all picked out for the temperature ranges. And I don't know if I want to do the 10 stitch zigzag blanket, I think it's called, or I do want to learn to crochet, and I know the crochet granny blankets are all the rage right now, so maybe I'll do that. I don't know. I haven't figured it out yet, but I need to, because this is from when he was 5 and he is going to be 9 in September. So kind of need to move it along. All right, concessions purchases. So there was a pattern that was brought up in the Handmade in Woolen episode number 44. They have a free coupon code for it. I'm not going to give out the coupon code. If you want the coupon code, go watch episode 44 of the Handmade in Woolen podcast. But it was for the, I'm not even going to attempt to say this. It's Galerie d'Apollon. It's French. I do not speak French. Pattern, but it's by Emma Wright. It's a pretty lace pattern. So again, if you want the pattern, go check out episode 44 of Handmade in Woolen podcast. This is going to be very short, but I wasn't going to record, but I decided, no, I want to do this every other week. I do have the time today. Just do it. Be like Nike. All right. So, film room, books, TV, and etc. So, since the last episode, I finished The Sycamore Row by John Grisham. It was all right. Not the best John Grisham book, but I kind of figured out what was going to happen. But it was okay. And I also finished See You at the Top by Zig Ziglar, which again, I mentioned the last time, was written in the 70s. So he has a lot of very strong views about women and homosexuals, and he's very religious. So if you can get past the preachiness and the antiquated ideas about women and men and certain groups of people like homosexuals, you can deal with it. He's got a lot of good points. You just got to get past that stuff. And then I also finished, since last time, Exposed, The Secret Life of Jodi Arias by Jane Velez Mitchell. It's a true crime book. If you don't know who Jodi Arias is, she was convicted for the brutal murder of her ex-boyfriend in Arizona. And she's quite a character. She has some serious, serious issues and is pretty much a psycho. So it's interesting. It's if you can't deal with a lot of graphic sexual content, I don't recommend reading this book because there's a lot of it in there. And I do not consider myself a prude in any way, shape, or form, but it was a little much for me at points. And I was like, eeh, very descriptive things that should not be told outside of people's bedrooms. So I'm going to take a drink real quick. All right, so now for my self-improvement book, I am reading Big Magic, Creative Living Beyond Fear by Elizabeth Gilbert. And mostly the book is talking about how ideas and inspiration are living things. And if you get inspiration and you ignore it, it's going to move on to somebody who will not. So it's kind of hokey, but it's interesting. And for my pleasure reading, I am reading The Unfinished Work of Elizabeth D. by Nicole, I think it's Brenner, or maybe it's Brene. So this is about a woman whose best friend is killed in a plane crash. And the best friend leaves her journals dating back to when she's like 9. And so the best friend is reading them while they're on vacation, and she's realizing that this woman, who was your very stereotypical perfect wife and mother, is not exactly what she thought she was, like anybody. And she's dealing with her own issues in her own marriage, so it's kind of interesting parallels. So it's pretty good. I'm only about 40 pages in so far, but so far so good. And then I have a few podcasts that are maybe not new. Some of them, 2 of them definitely aren't new, but newer. So first up is Wonderwall with Andrea, who's Andy J on Ravelry, and she has just returned. This is a video podcast, so she's just returned after about a year hiatus to podcasting. So I always enjoyed, she's in Australia, so she has that wonderful accent. So I've always enjoyed her podcast, so I'm glad she's back. And then next up is the They Knit 2 podcast with Heather, who is Heather219 on Ravelry, and Mia, who is Mia Knits 2 on Ravelry. And Heather used to host the Knits and Things podcast, and now she is back podcasting again with her friend Mia. So the first episode is up. I enjoyed it. Check it out. It's a video podcast on YouTube. And then next up is the Power Pearls podcast with Kara Gott Warner. It's an audio podcast, and she is the editor of Creative Knitting Magazine, and so this is interviews with different people in the industry, and it's been interesting. I've listened to 2 episodes. Not the most recent one, because that just came out, and I haven't listened to it yet. And then the very first one, yeah. So it's been interesting. So I always like hearing about why people and how people get involved in the industry. So, and then the last one is definitely not new. She's got 90 some episodes, and she's very famous in the knitting world, but it's the Knitting Expat podcast with Mina, who is Mina Phillip on Ravelry. And she is going to be having a baby any day now. She has not already had it. So, but again, she's got 90 some episodes. So if you haven't watched her, which I'm sure you probably have, check her out. And we're 14 minutes in, and I'm done. So we're moving on into the post game, which is the wrap up. So contact me on Ravelry. I'm Crazy Knitting Fool. Twitter, it's Crazy Knit Fool. Instagram is Crazy Knitter Studio. The blog is crazyknitterstudio.blogspot.com, and the email is crazyknitterstudio@gmail.com. So I'll be back in 2 weeks, which is March 4th. Holy May. Holy moly, it's going to be March. So until then, I hope you have a good 2 weeks and you get lots of knitting and crafting and reading and watching TV and good times, and stay out of trouble. And if you can't stay out of trouble, just don't get caught. And I'll talk to you later. Bye.